All right, Milena Prinzi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stu, for having me. I'm extremely excited to be here with all the listeners of Finding Direction and looking forward to our chat.
Absolutely, me too. And I figured if you could kind of start off by filling in our listeners a little bit as far as what did life look like for little Milena as you grew up?
Well, I grew up in Colombia, South America, and I came to the States when I was 20 years old
Hmm.
as a trained journalist. And I didn't know anybody. So everything was brand new. I came here to study English. And then I just kind of, I stayed. Everything was so different, but I knew that I was ready to start a new life as an adult, as a
Yeah.
professional. And I just fell in love with New York City. And, over 20 years later, I'm here still loving the city, fulfilled my career, continue working as a journalist. And I'm just really, got married along the way, have a couple of
Yeah.
kids, and I'm here, trying to make the best of life.
I love it. And when you were 20, did you come over? Was it like your whole family came over or just you came over?
It was just me. I came over. I signed up there is a school here called Hunter College, and they are known for having like a great language department. So
Oh,
I really signed up from Colombia I really wanted to study English. And even though, it's part of the curriculum in probably every country in the world that we need to know
right.
English, I really, it's very difficult to actually master a language when you are not immersed in the environment.
Yeah,
So I was like, I'm going to
totally.
go there, take the class. It was, the whole thing was probably 8 months. And after 8 months, I was like, oh, I still have some time left on my visa. Let me just hang out. And then I was trying to figure it out. How could I stay? And I started doing the whole
Hmm.
immigration process, and it worked out. So I decided to stay. My family they weren't too happy about it because they were like, wait, I thought you were just going to go just to
Yeah.
take this class. But I stayed and I went back to the same university that I was taking my English classes, and I said, "Hey, can I transfer my credits so I could, you know, um, have a diploma here as well?" And they say
Gotcha.
yes, absolutely. And so I did that, and then the rest is history. I graduated with a BA in journalism and communications, and I started the journey, getting
Yeah.
internships and all that.
So I would be curious, 20 years old, I'm just trying to think of myself back at 20 years old and just moving across from your home country to another country. And, obviously at first maybe it's like, okay, this is an exchange program. We're going for, 8 months. And all of a sudden it turns into like, no, I'm 20 years old and I want to build my life here. Like, what was that process like for you? Was it um, like a scary process? Was it like, okay, I'm going to be here. I don't have family. I don't really know a ton of people. Or kind of what was your take on that? And how did you, I guess, muster the courage to stay?
Well, I knew some people that were here, so that really helped. And I had actually they would encourage me to stay. So probably if
Oh,
I didn't have that support, I wouldn't have stayed. But they were like, stay, just give it a shot. I did all the paperwork to renew, to extend my visa. And as long as you are a student or enroll in a student program, you can. So I did that. And it
yeah.
just was like, I never make like really long-term plans. I still don't do that. I'm a fan of short-term
Huh.
goals.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, okay, I'm here for another year. And then it was like another year and another year. And in the meantime, I was working. One of my friends had connected me with an immigration lawyer. So then I was working with this person because I needed to make sure that I was here in a legal status, and I was doing just the process as it was going. And then one thing led to another, and I got so comfortable. I think after a year of being here, then finally I felt like this felt like home.
Yeah.
That it could be home.
Right.
And when I went back to visit my family and friends in Colombia, I realized that I wanted to come back to New York. And I
Hmm.
did. And that's when actually felt like, you know what, this is my home. And
Yeah.
then, I really, I started to make sure that, to get a job, finish getting my degree, start getting work and start a life here.
Yeah. It's interesting too that you say just in the aspect of looking like at short-term goals or not looking at life, not looking at life as like, what am I going to do in 20 years, but more or less like, what's my next year going to look like? And it kind of reminds me of, there's a saying Martin Luther King said, and he said, you don't have to see the whole staircase. You just have to see the first step in order to get
Mhm.
to where you want to go. And I'm curious for you, like, what would you say? Because, and I've seen this in doing some research on you that you've kind of, and you mentioned, continued to live your life and like, let me not look at the next, super long, but like, let me look at the next year, the next like kind of short term. What would you say is the importance of looking at life kind of in the next like 6 months, year, opposed to getting kind of sucked into like in 10 years, 20 years, and all of that?
It's just more to me, it's just more realistic. And
Mm,
when you set yourself small short-term goals, it's easier for us to achieve them. And when we achieve, we get that reward because we accomplish those goals. When you look at something like long term, it's hard to visualize what is going to be the end result. And we get discouraged, at least me.
yeah.
I get discouraged in the process and I end up not accomplishing anything.
Mm,
So one of my first like full-time jobs that I had here, in the editorial realm was working for a company called Weight Watchers International,
yeah.
and this company, develop it's a weight loss program. One of the things I realized after, working and listen to people that were enrolled in the program and having, success stories achieving their weight loss, um,
Right.
the ones that actually succeeded were the ones that actually looked, just focus on the next meal. So it
Mm,
was like I have my breakfast, I did well. It's a point system. So it's like I only ate the points that I was allowed to eat them. What am I going to do for lunch? And there were some people that set up this crazy, like I'm going
yeah.
to lose 50 pounds in the next month, 6 months. It seems like you might say, oh, that seems like a short-term goal, but in reality it's quite long because you can see, every to get there in a
Yeah.
month, you have to count every hour of the day, every minute, every craving. It's hard. So when I saw people setting those, like, what is my next goal, is lunch or is dinner, I
Yeah.
was like, that's actually a recipe for success,
Wow.
because we can hold ourselves accountable. When it's something like we can look forward to in the next hour or two. In my case, like when all
Yeah.
the career changes I've done, personal evolutions and everything, like getting fit, working out, all this kind of stuff, I'm always like, it has to be within a couple of weeks.
Yeah. And it,
Otherwise I won't do them.
right. And it is so interesting too. It's like, I think especially for anybody that's listening to this and, are in a place of like, not quite sure what they want to do with their life. It's like if we do start to look at, I got to get this job and it's going to pay this certain, like if we start looking so far in the future, it can be almost overwhelming where it's like maybe
Very
we,
much so.
right. It's like maybe we break it down and say, all right, like step one is what's something that interests me, right? And let me just focus on that for today. And then once I have that for today, then you go into tomorrow, maybe you say, all right, well, who's, three companies that I could Google online, or just like, I love
Hmm.
the approach of like, rather than trying to look at the whole castle that you're trying to build or whatever, look at like, how can you lay kind of like Will Smith says, like brick by brick. And if you lay each brick as good as you can lay that brick, then eventually one day you're going to have the castle or the house, the thing that you're building, which is your life. And it's interesting
Absolutely.
too. Like I almost look at my life and like, and maybe you've had a similar thing like this happen in your life, but when I look back at my life 5 years ago, I'm like, there's no way you could tell me that I was doing what I'm doing today. Because it's like so much can happen in 5 years. And I think especially when you're in a place of your life where you're trying to figure out your life, it's like there's so many changes, there's so many things that, may get switched up that in 5 years it really is hard to plan for like what's my life going to look like. But if you can focus on the day in and the day out, I think that's such a beautiful perspective on that.
Yes. And for me, for example, I hate the concept of New Year's resolutions. I'm like, who came up with that? It's
Yeah.
like, it doesn't make any sense to me that you're going to set some goals that you're going to achieve in a year. It just doesn't make any sense. And there is a
Mm.
reason why no one gets to accomplish them.
Yeah.
And people, I have friends who they take these New Year resolutions goals so seriously. They go and buy stationery for it, mood boards,
Yeah.
they spend, and I'm like, you walk into their apartments, New York City apartments are small. So you
Yeah.
walk into their apartments and there you see the big board and all these things. And I'm like, what is this? It's like my New Year resolutions. And then you start, coming in 6 months, whatever, later. Nothing has changed.
Yeah.
It's all the same, but they take it seriously every single day, every single year. And I'm like, why don't you like break it down and focus on these things like on a weekly basis?
Right.
That way you have to you're going to make sure that you actually accomplish some of them, or you are going to realize these are impossible. I'm never going to do this, and then just drop them off the list.
Yeah.
For me, I tend to have a little anxiety, and maybe that's the reason why I don't set myself these long-term goals, because I get just anxious thinking about them.
Mm.
So instead of that, instead of thinking about it, I just start doing whatever it is, that thing at the end of the day. And I'm a big calendar person. So I
Yeah, me too.
whatever I have to do, I have a calendar. Every week, fill. And then I just go like, okay, it's going to be, this is what I'm going to do today. And it's almost like by the hour. I make sure that it's not. And then if I see it's no way that I can accomplish the next task in the next hour, I just go into the calendar and move it for the next day.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not there like hunting me, looking
Right.
at me.
Yeah. And it's just like, again, breaking it down to the small little things, because when you add those up, they get you to the big thing. And I think with like New Year's goals, it's such a good point. It's like, if we set a goal once a year and then we have 365 days to waver off, and like, like it makes so much sense that if you set a goal once a year for a year and you never come back and really regularly check in on that, like you're set up for failure, versus I think like one thing I was taught is it's like, if instead of once a year, you look at where you're at in your life or with this goal, and you kind of repivot or refocus on like, where do I want to go? Where am I? Let me check in and see if I'm on track. Rather than doing it once a year, it's like, imagine you even did that once a month. And now you take what most people do once a year, and once a month, you kind of give yourself an opportunity to say like, where am I? Am I where I want to be? Am I on track? And it's like, if you break it down even further, let's say you do it once a week. Well, now you have 52 times where you say, am I on track? Am I where I want to be? Am I moving in the right direction? And it's like, it allows you, by breaking it down, I mean, even if you go to the days, right? It's like now you have 365 times you're checking in rather than what most people do, which is just once a year. And so one question I would have for you, and we were kind of talking about this a little bit before we started recording, is you said that as you've gone through your life, you've continuously I'm blanking on the word, but you've continuously like pivoted and
Reinvent.
you've
Yeah.
continuously reinvented yourself. And you said like, I always give myself permission to reinvent myself. And I'm curious for you, can you break that down for us? Like, what does that look like? One, giving yourself permission to reinvent yourself, and then two, kind of actually going through that process.
Yeah. So, because I do not set these long-term goals for myself, I either like mostly like on the professional, when it comes to the professional scheme.
Yeah.
I'm so portions of my personal life as well. I have the ability to pivot and change all the time the approach. Meaning I don't change I don't have like chains that are actually holding me down for whatever it is that I'm doing. For example, to make it concrete, I've been working on editorial for 20 years. I started working as a trained journalist, was print, was newspapers, then magazines. A lot of people that I started working at that time are still working in those newspapers and magazines, even though the whole industry has changed. And they were like, it is this thing that if you start in print to pivot to online editorial, it's like, that's not a true journalist. It's like it's being locked down upon.
Yeah, interesting.
To me, it's more like, I don't really care. That's where we're heading anyway.
Yeah.
And I made that transition. Then I was working, it was very news and everything. And then I started getting very interested about lifestyle. And that's when I did the switch over to healthy living. And I was working with this company, Weight Watchers.
Yeah.
While I was working there, I realized, one of the verticals that does very, very well that people are extremely interested about is the beauty vertical, but it has such a bad rep, like people think it's just like superficial. The stories are really bad. And it's like, is there a way to actually make it meaningful? So I switched over to the beauty thing. And I was like, I've always been so interested about healthy living, organic, plant-based, all this movement. It was like, I was one of the pioneers back in the day, like back 2011, 2012. Nobody was really talking about these things, on the editorial realm.
Right.
People were doing like more like food co-ops and like CSAs and farm to table, but not, it's like, who cares about it? Like this might be something that they are doing with their community. So I saw the whole transition in the conversation to that and the movement of, organic and vegan and everything. And so I remember some of my colleagues that were with me in print, they were always like, oh my God, like, why don't you just pick one thing and stick to it? And I'm like, I am picking one thing. I'm editorial. I'm working on editorial.
Right.
That hasn't changed. But what have changed is as I was changing as a person and I was interested in some things, I tried to incorporate that into my work as well.
Yeah.
And
love that.
And that's how I've been, and the person that I'm right now, the type of work that I do, how I choose to spend my working hours. I work right now. I'm the editor-in-chief of Unilever's only online editorial platform called allthingshair.com. So I work with all the Unilever hair brands. I manage a team for the editorial here in English, and we have a website also in Spanish. And it's like some of my friends will be like, can you imagine that you will be working doing hair content and all
Yeah.
this right now when you first came here? Some of them are still with those newspapers,
Yeah.
even though they are dying out, they are stressed out about it. It's very hard to, they are looking very long-term retirement. It's like, dude, it's like 25 years from now, so I don't have that stress. I want to obviously be prepared for my retirement, but I'm doing this right now, but I'm not sure if I might want to stay in editorial for the next 25 years. I might want to switch over to another industry, so I definitely don't hold myself hostage to something.
Right.
And I like to change.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I feel like just a couple things that I'm picking up from what you're saying is it's like one, I mean, it's kind of like the classic like Blockbuster Netflix sort of thing where like Blockbuster they were so stuck in their ways and this is what it's going to be, and then obviously today now they're out of business, and it's like what you basically did the same thing with your career where it's like you said two things that I picked up on. Like one, you were always just listening to like what's going on in the world, where are things shifting, and it's like you were always very, from what I'm hearing, aware of like what's going on, where are things shifting, where are things moving. And then I think the second thing, which is such an unbelievably beautiful thing, and I think for anybody listening to this is something that if you adopt it, it can really lead you to some incredible places, is like it seems like you've always continued to have an open mind, right? And
Yeah.
not be closed off to like this is the way, this is it, like I'm going this way. Like you've allowed yourself to be open to other things and have an open mind and listen and hear things, and it's like that's allowed you to build such a beautiful lane in your life. And I think too often we do something in our life and we get so stuck in that lane and say, no, I've been doing this for so long, or I've been in this path and I got to stay down. I just don't even want to look the other way. But it's like you've allowed yourself to say, no, I'm going to have an open mind. I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen to what's going on in the world and to what you feel you're supposed to do. And it's just allowed you to really like build this beautiful path for your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I have always have a full-time job, and I have a freelancing job always.
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons that I get bored with things rather quickly. So I'm always fine, but you have to do it in a way where you have to look at your contract with your full-time job. What is that you're signing? Do you have a
Right.
non-compete? Are you allowed to do this thing? So I have been able to always freelance on the side. So I make that transition to try new things all the time. So if you look at my resume, it's like there is always like the full-time job. Whenever I was switching jobs, I said like, wait, so you've been doing like 3 jobs at the same time? I said, well, this is like the full-time job, and these 2 are like freelancing projects, maybe for 6 months, 7 months, maybe a year, something on the side. Right now, I've been trying completely different, working a little more towards the financial realm of
Yeah, I
things,
noticed that.
because during COVID-19, the whole pandemic here hit New York City the hardest,
Yeah.
and a lot of my friends and people that I really care about, members of my community, suffer. And I realized that, I was taught very old school from my household in Colombia. There was no taboos to talk about finances and preparing for your future and investing and all that. When I came here, I realized that it's a little bit of a taboo. Like
Yeah.
people don't really talk so much about it.
Right.
So I always rely, for example, in my group benefits that I got from my employers, but I also have had my own thing on the side with a private company.
Yeah.
And I figured that everyone did the same thing. And I realized through COVID that wasn't the case.
Definitely not.
So I kind of like made it I said, you know what, this is a great. And I always talk to my friends about it. I always was like, you need to have your own life insurance, your own benefits, because, these are yours. Nobody can take them away. You can decide what you want to do with them. The ones with your job, as long as you're working, they are great. But the moment you leave that employer, it's very difficult. You might lose those benefits, or it's very hard to migrate them to your new employer.
Yeah,
So it's like,
totally.
I always talk to my friends about it and my colleagues about it. But COVID definitely was like so many. I have to fund so many GoFundMe accounts
Hmm.
because people lost their jobs and lost their entire benefits they had. And depending on the contract that the employers have signed, some people lost their 401ks, which we all
Crazy.
rely on that. And it was really crazy. So I was like, you know what? This is a great learning opportunity here for me.
Yeah.
And then I called my company that I've been a client for 21 years since I came here in 2000. And then I say, hey, what, I would love to become a spokesperson, for you. This is what I can do, just like a teaching sense. And since I know the
Yeah.
product so well from being a client, so I'm doing that now, in
Nice.
addition to my full-time editorial work. And I feel like it was almost like a calling, let
Yeah.
me educate people here along the way and just help them prepare, so when something happens, like
They're
what
ready
we
this
went
time.
through with COVID, um, we are not going to be completely uh, can look forward, can move on
Yeah.
because we don't have any benefits, So, and they say, I was just reading yesterday that a lot of these employers now are rethinking their benefits
Hmm.
because of the pandemic. And that was like, oh my God. So
Yeah. Just
whenever you hear that and you're like, they are not going to rethink it for the better and the benefit of the employee, they are going to rethink it for the better of themselves,
of the
of the
company.
employers. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's so interesting and so beautiful again, just how you've allowed yourself not really being in that space, allowing yourself to say, I'm gonna jump in, I'm gonna try it, I'm gonna feel it out. And I think that's such a beautiful approach to life is it's like if you have an interest in something, it's like jump into it, try it. Like you never know. You may try it and go, this sucks and I don't like it at all. Or like you, maybe, something you do, you go, wow, this actually is a calling that I feel I have that I never knew I had, but it's because you allowed yourself to step into it. And so truly, truly, truly so beautiful. And so one thing I'm curious is, obviously I believe you have two daughters, correct? And they're
Hmm.
17 and 20, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm curious for you, like, what is a piece of advice you give them as they kind of navigate throughout their life, and like, do you give them any guiding advice on, figuring out their life or how to go through life, anything like that that you just constantly kind of share or remind them of?
Um, they are their own person.
Yeah.
So I definitely, and they are both, they were born and raised here in New York City, which is not an ideal city to raise kids.
Yeah.
The energy of the city is so high, which is what a lot of people love as adults. But I think for kids, it just becomes like a pressure cooker.
Right. That's pretty crazy.
They both have definitely, they are New York City kids. They are very anxious about everything. They have very little patience about everything. They are always, their pace is super fast. They are always onto the next thing, onto the next thing.
Yeah.
So to me, and they put a lot of pressure on themselves because they are in very competitive environments. The schools here are extremely competitive. And so my thing is that I always teach them one step at a time. And it's okay, it's okay to fail. I feel like you learn every single time. And don't, I always say, don't pressure yourself, because the world would put all that pressure to you. And then if you, on top of that, you end up pressuring yourself, the outcome is going to be like you're so exhausted, you are mentally tired, and you're not going to have the energy to even start to accomplish those things that you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And it's a struggle every single day, because they are like, the grades needs to be this. Also with the friends, with the social media, they are also very social media generation. They are like major FOMO, right? They know, they are constantly like, oh, this person is with this person and I'm here. Oh, they didn't invite me. So you add that pressure to it.
Yeah.
But I always tell them, it's okay. I never put any pressure on them. Not even like getting into college. I'm like, this is going to be great. There are so many options.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, you can always transfer out. So I always try to take the pressure of it, just because based on my experience, I kept trying new things all the time. And it has worked for me. It has worked out for me. So nobody, for them, I want them to do the same thing. I want them to try a lot of things. When they were little, they had, they did everything: gymnastics, soccer, taekwondo, ballet, everything. My husband was like, oh, shouldn't they just stick to one thing? And I'm like, but no, they should try a lot of things and then decide what is the one thing that they want to master.
Yeah.
And they did. They chose one thing that they did for a couple of years, and then they were like, okay, now I'm over that. Let me try a new thing. And that's always been my approach.
Right. And I love it too that it's like we just live in a world almost of like always putting pressure on ourselves, the like pressure to have it all figured out, pressure to have the high paying job, pressure to build this image on social media where we look like we, are just like this perfect image. And it's, I think it's such a fresh breath of air for me to hear. And I think for anyone listening to this to just like take a deep breath and like, don't put the pressure on as much. Like things are going to work out. Like we as humans are innately ridiculously smart creatures. And if you take the pressure off yourself, at least what I've noticed in my life is as soon as you kind of take the pressure off and go, all right, let me just take a deep breath and know that it's going to work out. Like as soon as you kind of put yourself in that place, the world gives you a sign or you get an answer. Like the right things fall into place when you allow yourself to not feel like you need to micromanage every aspect of your life. Things seem to naturally kind of fall in the right place. And I think that's a beautiful gift you've given them that as they grow up in their life is going to help them tremendously. So thank you for sharing that with us. And so I guess I'm curious if people want to get more info on you. I know kind of as you mentioned, you're doing many different things. You're doing a lot of really cool things. If people want to get more info on you, see what you're up to, where's the best place that they can find you?
They can find me. I'm on all the social media platforms. But they can find me at allthingshair.com. That's a great website. Like I mentioned, it's a lifestyle website. We do hair content and beyond. We talk about people and stories and things that connect them. So I'm there. We have a very interactive website. We can get, we get in touch. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm really everywhere. People can really find me everywhere.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, we will put all those in the show notes so people can get access to it nice and easily. And then the last question I have for you, and this is a question I ask to every guest because we're all about helping people find direction, but we want to do it through action. And so I'm curious for you, what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
I'm a big believer of meditation. And it's not very easy to do, especially here living in New York City. Like you almost feel guilty that you are not doing anything even for 5 minutes. So that's something like I try to do every single day. I try to take at least like half an hour to meditate, and it's not like the closing my eyes and just doing, but sometimes it's just really like just turning everything off
Yeah.
and listening to, some classical music, or just like reading something for fun. And that is just really clearing your mind, and you don't have to be thinking about what is that next thing that you have to do that is on your calendar. That's one of the things that I do, and it helps
Yeah.
me like focus um, more, so I'm a big believer of that. And I also do, I think stretching is a great thing, which is something that I also do when I don't feel like I want to do meditation, or sometimes I do my meditation while I'm stretching. That's a
Yeah.
really, really good thing too. And then after, you feel like, so like all these knots in your back and are bothering your shoulders are just like loosen up, and you feel like you have energy. But really, it's just like taking those few minutes to reset, to do something that is for you, whatever it is that you do, um, and it's important to take care of ourselves every single day. And if you're a calendar person like me,
Yeah.
just block that time on your calendar, which I do. And I was like, me time is half an
Yeah.
hour every day.
I love it. Yeah. Sometimes you got to put on the calendar and protect it and just say, this is my me time. And so, um,
Yeah.
absolutely love that. Well, Milena, thank you so much again for being here on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your story, your life. And I know people are going to get some absolutely incredible things for it. So thank you so much for being here. And big time, we appreciate you.
Thank you, Stu. It was lovely being here with you and all the listeners.
Thank you so much.